Presence. You've heard me say this word again and again throughout the course. In my opinion, it's probably the key psychological idea when competing in chess or anything else. Being in the moment, in competition, art, meditation, writing, whatever else. I think this is the most important part of performance state. Now, I'm sure you've noticed that throughout this course, I've shown you a lot of games that I've lost. I've done this for a number of reasons. First of all, the games that I've learned the most from in my chess career have been losses, and I think this is true of pretty much all competitors. We learn from our mistakes. Winning feels good. Winning feels really, really good. But losing is what makes us better. And it's very important for you as a player to take yourself on when you lose, to study the games that you lose. It's very tempting at times to look at the games that you win. And when you lose, I've seen a lot of players say things like, oh yeah, I lost this one because I was stupid. I made a dumb move. And not take it seriously, not really take on what the issue is. And I've shown you my losses because, first of all, like I said, I've learned a lot from them myself, and it's been a good kind of window into my own interesting quirks as a psychological human being and player. But also to open up the forum for you to do the same, for you to take on your losses. Everybody loses. There's no shame in losing a big game. What the shame is to turn away from that loss, not take it seriously, not take it on as food for growth. Another thing which I'm sure you've noticed throughout this course is that there's been a lot of discussion of mistakes, of handling things when the mood changes. The game is going one way and then it changes character, and you have to deal with it. I've discussed this in the idea of transitional moments. I've discussed this in the section on materialism, on the illusion of certainty. In all of these themes, we've seen that the chess game doesn't always go the way we think it's going to go. And when it turns, when it surprises us, when it shifts from left to right, those are the moments where we really have to stick with it. We have to keep our composure and handle the immediate situation. This last game I'm going to show you I played against the Grandmaster Sergei Kudrin, a very strong Russian Grandmaster who's lived in America for a number of years. This was in the U.S. Championship in 1995, the same tournament, in fact, that the first game against Kaidanov was in. The opening is the Scandinavian. What I want you to notice throughout this game is that it's tremendously rich, tremendously complex. We both make mistakes. We both have chances. The key to this game is presence, staying with the game, not getting caught up in the last emotional moment, not getting caught up in the fact that, oh man, I was winning last move and now look what's happened, or I missed a draw and now I'm worse, or anything like this. Just staying with the moment, dealing with each new situation as it presents itself, understanding that chess is a game of ups and downs. We both handled this game pretty well. It was tremendously complex. We both came up with excellent ideas. And up until the very, very last move, the game could have gone either way. Let's take a look. e4, d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5. You've seen a number of my other games in this one. Knight c3, queen a5. Knight c3 is the most typical response for white. d4, c6, knight f3, bishop f5. For years, the Scandinavian centered around the idea for black of playing bishop g4 here. But this line is actually pretty good for white after h3, bishop h5. If white knows to play g4, bishop g6, then knight e5, followed by the idea of h4 later on, this is a little difficult for black. The line that I've played for a number of years is bishop f5, a very strong positional system. Maybe white gains a small edge in some games, but black has an excellent structure for the endgame. And it's very good for converting into a win against slightly weaker players, holding for a draw against stronger players, and often picking off pawns and winning games against stronger players as well. Very solid opening for black. And if you're playing against somebody who's looking to win, who's looking to be very aggressive, this is a nice way to coax him into aggression in a similar way that I handled the game against Peter Ox. He played bishop c4, knight f6, bishop d2, e6. Important in this opening is the idea that he doesn't have a very good discovery. He played knight h4, attacking my bishop, bishop g6, he took it, knight takes g6, h takes g6, and queen f3. And here I really challenged him, played queen f5, immediately making white take on a pretty important decision. He has to decide whether to trade queens or not, and if he decides not to trade queens, then he has to decide whether to play queen e2 and sacrifice the c2 pawn, which is dangerous, or to play queen d1, which pretty much concedes that his last move was bad. If he does play queen takes f5, then after g takes f5, black's game is excellent. I've gotten rid of my bad bishop. My pawn on f5 is very good, defending the e4 square, taking control of the center. My next couple moves can be knight bd7, knight b6 to d5. I can play rook d8, castle queenset if I want to. Bishop can come to d6. I have the open h-file. This position is tremendously comfortable for black. Kudrin is a very dynamic player, and he played queen e2, fitting his style. And now I have to make a decision. Should I play normally with knight bd7, or should I take the dare, queen takes c2? This is at once a chess position, in other words, you have to find the correct objective move, and it's a stylistic decision. You take into account how the two different players feel about the game, what our styles are. I'm very aggressive. I like to make things double-edged. He's also an attacking player. Queen takes c2 fit into both of our games. Of course, I had to make sure that my queen wasn't going to get trapped, that it wasn't just that he was inviting me in and he saw a way to take care of it, but I calculated carefully and saw that I could come out. I played queen takes c2. And now the game got very exciting. Of course, if he plays rook c1, I can always go back, queen f5. He has to do something now. A big part of this type of chess position when white has sacrificed material is that if I have 2 or 3 extra moves, like, say, knight bd7, bishop e7, and castle kingside or queenside, probably kingside. In this type of game, it just took 3 moves for me to consolidate, and everything is good, especially if my queen is back in safety. And if I consolidate in a position like this, up a pawn, the endgames are excellent even if it's even material, so my position will be winning. So white has to do something. And it's very good to be in a position where your opponent constantly has to do things, because he can sometimes overextend, he can push himself too far. After queen takes c2, he played bishop d3, which is the correct way to continue with the initiative. I played queen takes b2, and he played rook b1, going after the b7 pawn. I played queen a3. What would you do with white now? Think deeply. Don't just look at the obvious move. Look for the best move. He can't trap my queen. If he tries something like rook b3, I can always go back queen e7, defending the pawn. I want you to notice already how the game has changed character. It began with a slow positional opening. Then I played queen f5, offered an endgame. He went back. Then I could have played positionally with knight bd7. But no, I chose to take the dare, queen takes c2, and suddenly the game became completely double-edged. Now I'm up 2 pawns. He has a choice. He can take on b7 if he wants to, or he can try something else. If rook takes b7, I was going to play bishop b4. You should be familiar with this point with the defensive idea of giving back a little bit of material when you're up material in order to convert your advantage. If you can stabilize by giving back 1 pawn when you're up 2 pawns, then you're still up a pawn. Bishop b4 is going after his knight. If his knight moves, we can take on d2, trading off, liquidating into a good endgame. I can always castle kingside. And if he tries bishop takes g6, which was his attacking idea, what I had in mind was f takes g6. Of course, you see that if bishop takes c3, after queen takes e6 check, I'm going to get mated because I can't take the queen because my pawn is pinned to my king. But here I have the response f takes g6, and after queen takes e6, I simply play king d8. My king looks loose there, but truth be told, he can't be attacked very easily. I'm threatening rook e8, which would win his queen. And after white castles, I can't play bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, because then I get mated with queen e7 check, king c8, queen c7 mate. But I can cover up my game with bishop d6, a very strong move. This strengthens my king, gets out of the way of rook takes b4, which might set up some problems for me. It threatens bishop takes h2 check, which would cause him big troubles because king h1 I have any discovery I want. My next couple moves can be knight bd7, rook e8 if he defends on h2. I'll be up a piece. This is an excellent position for black. So the sacrifice doesn't work after bishop b4. So Kudrin rose to the challenge. He saw that if he took back 1 pawn, after bishop b4, his attacking ideas wouldn't work anymore. I'd be able to castle after he defended his knight, and black would have an excellent game. He kept the initiative with the very powerful move, d5. Take some time and look at black's responses. Do you see why this is so strong? I have 2 real options here. One is to play c takes d5, and one is knight takes d5. If c takes d5, then after rook takes b7, he keeps the options of playing knight b5 next, and bishop b5 check next. It's better for me to play knight takes d5 just because I want to trade down one of his key attacking pieces. So I played knight takes d5, then he played knight takes d5, of course my e-pawn is pinned to my king, and after c takes d5, rook takes b7. And now his idea becomes clear. The next move will be bishop b5 check. I can't block it with my knight because he'll be able to take it. If I play a move like bishop d6, then he can play the very strong bishop takes g6. Now if I castle, he has the move rook takes f7, and I'm in big trouble. And if I take it, he plays queen takes e6, I can't defend the rook again and I'm up the creek. If instead of castling I play f takes g6, then after queen takes e6 check, bishop e7, do you see white's best move? Here he has the very strong rook c7, a slow move. I can't castle, my king is stuck on e8, his next will be rook c8 check. I have to defend it with knight a6. Then he has queen c6 check. I have to defend my rook with my other rook by playing king f7. And then after queen takes d5 check, white wins the game easily because if king f6, bishop g5 is mate, and if I go back, he takes my rook, and I'm finished. So you can feel how in this game every decision is of the utmost importance. If I had played the simple move bishop d6, bishop takes g6 would give him a decisive advantage. I can't do that. I have to find that and play bishop e7, which I did. Do you see what the difference is here? Now, if bishop takes g6, I can castle. Remember before in this position he had rook takes f7. Now that's blocked by my bishop, which is defended by my queen. The bishop will have to move, and then after I play knight c6, I'm up a pawn, fully developed. He can never try to mate me with queen h5 because his bishop will be hanging, or else, at the very worst, I can play f5 and lock it down. Black is much better. After bishop e7, he saw the bishop takes g6 didn't work anymore because I can castle, and he played bishop b5 check, keeping my king in the center. Now I have to play king f8. This is a very dynamic game. I have two pawns, he has compensation against my king. I like black's game here. It's very good, but it's also very difficult to play. Move by move, we have to both stay present and solve the problems that the other guy puts before us. He castled here. Do you see what my idea is? I've been waiting for him to castle, so I could play the move knight c6. The point is that I want to develop. You see, if he takes the knight on c6, then queen d6 will attack the bishop on c6 and the mate on h2. I've developed because of a tactic. If he does something slow, like g3, blocking the diagonal, then I can play a6, attacking his bishop and preparing to develop that way. If he then plays rook c7, preparing rook c8 check, I can simply play king g8. So if he checks me, I can come out to h7. And then after queen g4, preparing rook c8, king h7, queen h3, now I have the very strong move rook h5. Once again I'm attacking his bishop, his king is still in the center, and if he checks me I can come out to h7 and I'm perfectly safe. So he can't play the slow move g3, he has to castle, as he did, and after he castles, I develop with tactics knight c6. So my idea is that if bishop takes c6, I play queen d6. He played rook c1, preparing the rook coming down to c7. This game is very, very delicate. If you were black, what would you do here? Move by move, we have to solve the problems. Stay present, stay relaxed, handle the immediate situation. He's attacking my knight. He's preparing to play rook c1 down to c7. I have to move my knight out of the way and keep a nice solid defensive position. Knight d4 might seem aggressive, but after the queen moves, I'm going to want my knight to be defensive. My correct move is knight d8, attacking his rook on b7, which makes it hard for him to double up on the 7th rank, and when he does, I'll be defending f7. He played rook d7, and now I played an absolutely crucial move. Black to move. What will you do? You may know the idea that it's important for rooks to be connected. Of course, my rooks cannot be connected in this game because my king and knight are not going to get out of the way so quickly. I have to activate my king-side rook, and I also want to prepare to move my king to safety. It would be nice to have the h-file to go to. Here I played the excellent rook h4, a very dynamic move. Now my rook can come to e4 if it wants to. d4 controls the entire 4th rank, which is quite important. After rook h4, I'm convinced that my position is much better. He played bishop d3. My threat was rook e4. I played bishop f6. You can already feel that black is unwinding. My rook looks active now, not passive. My king is pretty safe on f8 and g8. My knight is a good defensive piece. I can improve with rook b8 whenever I want to. My queen on a3 is excellent. I'm up 2 pawns. The pawn on a2 is under attack. I've done a good job of solidifying defensively. Black's game is very good. He played g3. Now I knew that my central pawns were very important, and all I have to do is freeze his initiative. I played rook d4. Sometimes in this type of position, an exchange sacrifice can be a very good way to win a game. If, say, at some point, I don't have to right away, but I trade rook for bishop, then I take his a2 pawn, and if he has no more attack, my a pawn and my d pawn could be decisive. He played rook c3, defending his bishop. I took queen takes a2, and he played rook c7. This is why I left my knight on d8. f7 is guarded. I improved my defensive position a little bit, king g8, moved it out of the way of threats. He was planning ideas of sacrificing on f7, taking on e6, maybe sacrificing on g6. I have to watch out for these things. King g8 is a good move. Rook takes f7 doesn't work now. After knight takes f7, queen takes e6, I can just play rook takes d3. If he takes on f7 with his queen, then I can just move my king out of the way and everything's protected because my bishop on f6 is excellent. And if he plays rook takes f7, then after queen b1 check, king g2, queen b6 is a tremendously strong move. You see, he was threatening discovered check, but I attack the piece which would be delivering that check. And now if he defends passively with queen d7, then I can take his bishop on d2, and of course I'm up a rook and a piece, and I'm mating him on f2. And if finally he plays rook takes f6 check, then I can simply trade queens, queen e6, rook e6, then after rook takes d2 I'm up a rook. I make queens. Black wins easily. He played king g2, getting out of the way of the tactics. This is a typical grandmaster move. White thinks about things deeply, calculates all the variations, sees that critical in all my defensive ideas is the check on the back rank, so before any of the tactics come into fruition, he plays king g2 getting out of the way. A good move. Now I played a5. I've stopped his attack for the most part. Now I want to start pushing my passed pawn. He played queen e3. As you can imagine, up to this point we've both used a lot of time, and we were both in time pressure. We both had around 10 minutes on our clocks to make about 14 moves. It's a complicated position. There's no question at this point that Black's game is better. My knight on d8 is doing very well to freeze out his two rooks. I have to watch out for all of his tactical ideas. How would you handle this for Black? Here I continued with my plan, a4. I wanted to push up the board, but this was an exchange sacrifice that wasn't necessary. Here he played bishop c3, and I've taken away the only square from my rook with my a4 move, and I have to play rook takes d3. I still thought this would be very good for me, but it wasn't necessary. My best would have been to expand in the center, e5. Now white runs into big trouble. I'm pressuring with e4, and after bishop c3, do you see what I have in mind? Now I have two options. First of all, I can simply play rook takes d3, and after queen takes d3, d4, and after bishop e1, now I can play a4. Here my a-pawn is very strong, my central pawns have advanced a little bit, but positionally this doesn't seem like it's the best way to go because I've put all my pawns on the same color as my bishop. Of course it would be nicer to have my pawns on light squares, like that, if my d5 pawn could be defended so that my bishop would get sliced into the game. I have better. My best here is knight e6, occupying the square just vacated by my pawn. Now if he takes on d4 with his bishop, I obviously take back with my pawn attacking his queen, then I can take on c7, I'm up 2 pawns, and it's a great position. If he moves his c7 rook that's attacked to a7, then obviously the trade rook takes a7 is very good for me. I've traded off one of his most active pieces for my least active piece. I'm up 2 pawns, my position is phenomenal, I'm going to attack him through the center, I'm going to push my a-pawn, he's in big trouble. If he plays rook b7, then the c5 square should light up in your mind. Here I can either take on d3 right away, or just play knight c5 right away. White's in big trouble. Everything is getting forked for my knight on c5. His best is to maintain the attack. Rook takes f7, but then I would play rook takes d3. Then after queen takes d3, knight takes c7, rook takes c7. Once again we've used the technique, giving back 1 pawn to convert the advantage. I would play e4, queen e3, and rook f8. Now Black is up 2 pawns instead of 3, yes it's true, but that's plenty. We're going to trade off bishops. Say he plays bishop takes f6, then I play rook takes f6. Now my king is very safe on the h7 square. I'm pressuring f2 so his queen can't go far away. I'm up 2 pawns. That d pawn's going to run up the board. The a pawn's going to run up the board. Black is winning. This was the way to win the game. I missed e5 and played a4. He played bishop c3, rook d3, queen d3. And now I made another mistake. I played bishop takes c3. It turns out that objectively I should have allowed him to force a draw. After queen b3, Rook takes f7, knight takes f7, queen takes g6, bishop takes c3, queen takes f7 check, king h8, queen h5 check, king g8, queen f7 check. He has perpetual check and the game would be drawn. I was pushing for more than that, and I was a little optimistic. I want you to feel how many times this game has changed character. We're both moving with it. We're finding the best moves in each situation, or at least we're trying to. We've both made a number of mistakes. The key in this type of game is not to get frozen in one moment of time, not to cling to a position where we made a slightly wrong move, but to deal with each position without worrying about the last move. Here I played bishop takes c3. We were in big time pressure at this point. He played queen takes c3, and I played queen b3. Here I could have forced a draw again after queen b1. Rook c8, rook takes c8, queen takes c8, and queen e4 check. To get out of checks he has to try f3. You can look at the other possibilities and make sure that you agree with this idea. Queen e2 check, king h3, and now I have the very strong move king h7. And after rook takes d8, g5. This is the kind of abnormal situation which you can run into in a chess game. I have 3 pawns for a rook, but if he's not careful, my next move could be king g6, for example, if he plays rook h8 check, then after king g6, queen f1 check and f5 will be mate. I have also queen takes f3 in the position. My idea is that after he plays queen c1, then I can play king g6. It's very, very hard for white to defend. And if he tries to defend his material with queen h1, that's the only way to hold the f1 square from mate and hold the f3 square, then after f5, things are funky. Queen b1 would have led to these types of complications. And who knows what we would have found, still having 10 moves in the time pressure. It would have been very, very hairy. You might find it interesting to analyze these positions out, with queen and pawns against queen and rook, with his king very loose. Strange positions, but the added dimension of the a-pawn makes it very hard for white to defend. Here he played the dangerous move rook c8, which is very natural. It looks like he's just winning a piece, but he has a lot more to deal with. In fact, queen e7 was his best move, which is very dangerous. This keeps the position in the most complicated lines the possibility of queen h4 check. You can analyze it out and see what you think. We were in big time pressure. Feel the tension of the game. Flow with the moment. Rook c8, I played queen e4 check. f3, queen e2 check. The point is that it's very hard for white to get out of checks. He played king h3. I played rook takes c8, queen takes c8. Black to move. What would you do? I played king h7. I wanted to see how he was going to take the knight. You see, if he takes with the rook, I was going to play g5. In the time pressure, I'm playing to win this position. He has to watch out for queen f1 check. You've seen this position before in my analysis. King g6 is coming. f5 is dangerous. The f3 pawn is going. My a pawn is very dangerous. Completely unclear wild position. In the time pressure, this would be very hard to play with white. He took with the queen. Queen takes d8. Queen f1 check. King g4. I played queen c4 check. He played king h3. Now I played queen f1 check. The correct evaluation of this position is draw. He should have played king to g4, queen c4 check, perpetual check. Notice that if he plays f4, do you see the draw? The point is I have queen e2 check, and if he goes to h3, queen f1 check. If he goes to h4 now, what do I have in mind? It's true that white's up a rook, but he has no checks. The quiet move queen e2 threatens mate on h5. If he defends with g4, queen takes h2 is mate. His only move is king h3, queen f1, and we go back to the draw. After queen f1 check, he played king h4, pushing for the win when he should have been content with the draw. That's what I did earlier, which gave him chances. You see how complicated this game was? It's not a perfect struggle. It's a hard, hard chess game. We both had moments. We both made mistakes. What would be decisive is who was present to the very end. King h4. Here we both had to make 3 moves in just very few minutes. Big time pressure in a very complex position. What do you do with black now? I played queen takes f3. Now white is in big trouble. I'm threatening mate on h5. He played g4. Let's analyze this a little bit. What else could he do? Well, my threat is queen h5 mate. If he plays king h3, black to move and win. Do you see it? Here I have the very strong move f6. A quiet move. Calculate it out. First of all, notice he doesn't have perpetual check. If rook takes g7, king takes, queen e7 check, king h6, queen f8 check, king g5. No more checks. Do you see what my idea is with black? If he just makes a move like queen c8, I have queen f1 check, king h4, g5 check, king g4. If he goes to h5, queen h3 is mate. And now I have the very strong move queen f5 check. His only move is king h5, and then queen h3 is checkmate. f6 is a slow move which prepares mate. And in fact, if king h3, f6 is winning. Take some time yourself, analyze this out. Make sure that you see all the variations. It's very good to know that even in situations like this, when things go completely out of control, you can beat your opponent if you find all the unusual possibilities. If instead of king h3, he tries to defend with queen g5, which makes sense, after all, his king is under big attack, who would be better to defend with than the queen? The point is that I use the principle of two weaknesses. His queen is defending, but now I can play a3. That passed a-pawn comes into use. He needs to keep the queen on the king side defending his king, and now on the queen side, the pawn runs up the board. Now if he tries rook a7, I play f6. Do you see the difference? Now after queen g4, the only move not to get mated, I play queen f2 with a fork. I'm attacking his rook on a7, and when he deals with that by playing rook takes pawn, what do you do now? Black to move and win. The simple move, g5 check. For king h3 I have queen f1 mate. For king h5 I have g6 mate. It's beautiful, mating with pawns alone. And of course, if he plays queen takes g5, he's given up his queen and I win the game easily. The principle of two weaknesses. My pawn on a4 is his one weakness, his king is the other, larger weakness. He can't deal with them both, so after queen g5 to defend, after a3, he's in big trouble. After queen takes f3, he played g4. Now we only had seconds on our clock, and we'd been moving instantly for quite some time. I played queen f2 check, he played king h3. I played queen f3 check, king h4. What I didn't know is we had made time control, but neither of us had been keeping score because we'd been rushing to make the time control without losing on time. Here, black to move. What do you do? f6 doesn't work, because then rook takes g7 check forces perpetual check. Do you see why? If I take back, queen e7 check, king h6, queen f8, he goes back and forth. It's a draw. I should win now, once again using the principle of two weaknesses. a3. I push my pawn off the board, forcing him to defend against the queen side as well as the king side. His move g4 stopped queen h5 mate, but after a3, he has to bring another piece over there. This position is very complicated, so we're going to have to analyze for a while. Let's look at white's different tries to defend. So first of all, we have to see that white can't move with his queen. Queen a8, anywhere moving off the h4 d8 diagonal, gets mated immediately after g5 check. Now if king h5, queen h3 check, king takes g5, queen h6 is mate. And if king takes g5, queen f6 check, king h5, queen h6 is mate. So white's position is quite perilous, and the queen on d8 cannot move off that diagonal. He needs it for the defense. If he plays rook a7, which is the most logical move, what do you do with black? There's a trap here. If I play the simplest, queen f2 check, king h3, queen takes a7, white saves the game with perpetual. Queen h4 check, king g8, queen d8 check. There's no way to get out of it. Having that in mind, what do I play? I throw in g5. Now after king takes g5, queen e3 check, king h5 or king h4, when I take his rook, there are no more checks. After queen takes g5, I play queen f2 check. And now the difference is that after king h3, queen takes rook on a7, when he tries queen h4 check, I have an option, king g6, and he has no more perpetual. Remember when my pawn was on g6, I had to go back to g8, then queen d8 back and forth. But in this position, I play king g6. His only check is queen h5 check. I play king f6. If he plays g5, now I go back to e7. So if he plays queen h4 check, I play king up to e5, and this won't be a problem. I can run along the light squares and run my king back to the queen. Why do I say along the light squares? Because I don't want to make the mistake of after queen check, to play king d4 and allow queen f2 check, and I lose my queen. When we're very close to victory is often the moment when we can let it slip away and lose. Be careful. Say white plays rook b7. What do you do with black? I play a2. Now if he tries to counterattack with rook b8, which is of course the idea of rook b7, then I play queen f2 check, king h3, queen e3 check. Now if king h4, I'm sure you see the best move for black, the very strong g5. And now he can't take it. If we trade queens, queen takes g5, takes on g5, king takes a1, I make a queen. And if king h5, mate in 1, g6. So he has to go back to g2. I play queen d2 check, and he goes king f3. And now do you see the win? One more quiet move, g5. Funny that down a rook we can win like this. He can't defend the queening square enough times. g5 is of course defended by my queen. If he plays queen h8 check after king g6, queen h5 check, king f6, there are no more checks. If he defends the a1 square by playing rook a8, then I can just play a1 queen. And when he takes it, queen c3 check will pick off the rook and I'll be up 3 pawns, winning easily. The quiet move g5 is all it takes to win. The final chance for white to defend here would be to play queen e7. And after a2, notice that now he's defending his a7 square, try to defend with rook a7. What do you do with black here? Queen f2 check, king h3, and now once again the quiet move, g5, trapping the white king in there. Of course my threat is queen f3, mate. If he takes on g5, his rook hangs on a7, and once again I have the g6 square free, so after queen h4 check, king g6, I get out of checks. He can't do that. His only defensive try is queen c7, hanging in there by a thread, the classical case of the overloaded piece. His queen needs to guard g3 to stop queen f3 mate, and his queen needs to guard a7 to not lose the rook. What do you do? Black to move. What's the final blow? e5. Make the queen decide. If he takes my pawn, I take his rook. If he doesn't, queen f3 will be mate. And if he tries rook a3, a last-ditch attempt to guard the f3 square, we can distract the rook, remove the defender by making a queen. He has to take it, and queen f3 is mate. Black wins. He played g4. So I played queen f2 check, king h3. I played queen f3, king h4. I thought I could repeat one more time. My critical mistake was that I thought that I was winning. I sensed everything, but of course I couldn't see it all, and we were in terrible time pressure. I had no idea if we had made the time control or not. So I played one more time, queen f2 check, thinking we'd only be repeating twice. After queen f2, he played king h3, and now when I played queen f3, he claimed the draw by threefold repetition. King h4 would draw the game. We've had it 3 times, and in fact, when we checked out the score sheets, he was correct, and the game was drawn, which was, I think, a justifiable result after this incredible game. And it happens that the final position was winning for me. If he had simply made his move, of course, king h4, then I would have thought, because I thought that this was the moment that I had made time control. So there are a number of lessons to be learned here. First of all, technically speaking, always keep score if you can. Now, of course, there might be moments where you have just seconds on the clock, like this one, in which for a number of moves you can't. Then it's very good to just simply check off on your score sheet, just to make sure you know exactly where you are. This was a real chess game. Think about how many times the nature of the position changed. It was a solid strategical opening. Then I accepted his challenge and took that c2 pawn. He sacrificed 2 more pawns and went after my king. I defended, used tactics to complete my development. Then, just when things had solidified for me, I missed the central thrust e5, which would have pretty much wrapped things up. I had a couple chances to draw, but in the time pressure pushed for more than was there. And then he took over the initiative, and missed a big chance of his own with queen e7. We were in big time pressure. The game seesawed back and forth. If either one of us had gotten depressed by little inaccuracies, then the other would have jumped on the slightest hesitation. And finally, the game ended in that bizarre position, in which I'm objectively winning down a rook. And what happens? I lose track of the amount of repetitions while blitzing, and allow him to draw. This is chess. This is life. Real struggle isn't about perfection, but perseverance. Moment to moment, game to game, year to year. The great prize fighters aren't afraid of getting hit, but know that they can take a punch. So enjoy your chess battles, and don't get thrown by the unexpected. Thrive on it. Play with the knowledge that the greatest creations come when the plan falls to pieces. Just stay with the moment, and all will be well.